It began, as many diplomatic disasters do, with unexpected arrivals, as senior diplomatic attaché to Supreme Leader Drathar. I have overseen 17,842 official receptions at the Grand Council headquarters of the Quantum Dominion. In all those cycles, I have never witnessed such a flagrant disregard for protocol as demonstrated by the 3 humans who arrived on that fateful day. I am Zorn Vex. My lineage stretches back to the founding conquest, when my ancestors helped establish the protocols that would govern our glorious empire for millennia. The Quantum Dominion spans 73 galaxies, 14 dimensions, and exists in 3 temporal planes simultaneously. We have subjugated species that communicate through pheromonal clouds and creatures whose bodies are composed of pure mathematics. We have conquered worlds where gravity flows sideways and suns burn with cold fire. We are, by any measure, the most advanced civilization in known existence. And yet, we were utterly unprepared for humans. The day began with appropriate grandeur. The ceremonial fog machines were functioning at optimal capacity, filling the vast reception hall with the traditional purple mist of intimidation. The sonic enhancers emitted the low, ominous hum that has caused the representatives of 1,000 worlds to void their excretory organs in terror. The guard of inevitable submission stood in perfect formation, their ceremonial blades gleaming with the blood of those who had previously failed to show proper deference. "Senior Attaché," my assistant Grix whispered. "The Earth vessel has docked at the forbidden northern port." I felt my cranial ridge inflate with indignation. The northern port? That is reserved for Supreme Leader Drathar's personal battlecruiser. How did they obtain clearance? Grix's third eye blinked nervously. They did not. Senior Attaché. They simply landed. When Security Commander Vasknur attempted to impound their vessel, they offered him something called bourbon and asked about his reproductive cycle. He became confused. My scales rippled with horror. They breached security with alcohol and personal questions. I'm afraid so. Senior Attaché. They are approaching the Great Hall now. They did not wait for an escort. I hurried to intercept these diplomatic aberrations before they could create further chaos. As I rounded the corner of solemn reflection, I spotted them immediately. 3 humans, walking with the casual gait of beings utterly unaware of their cosmic insignificance. The one in front wore a blue uniform with gold trim and carried himself with an air of authority that bordered on insolence. Behind him walked a female with dark skin and intelligent eyes, carrying what appeared to be a data tablet. The third human, slightly shorter than the others, had a strange device strapped to his hip and was eating something that emitted a pungent odor. "Greetings," I intoned with practiced gravitas, expanding my ceremonial collar to its full 3-meter width. "I am Senior Diplomatic Attaché Zorn Vex, Voice of the Void, Herald of the 100 Horrors, Keeper of the Sacred Protocols of the Quantum Dominion. You stand in the hallowed halls of Supreme Leader Drathar, Conqueror of Conquerors, Master of Time and Thought, Destroyer of 1,000 civilizations. Tremble appropriately." The lead human extended his hand toward me in what I would later learn was not an attack gesture. "Captain Jake Brenner of Earth, this is Dr. Priyakumar, our cultural liaison, and Lieutenant Miguel Sanchez, Security. Sorry about the landing mix-up. Your northern bay was the only one not clogged with those fancy needle ships." I recoiled from his extended appendage. "You have violated 17 separate protocols by your unauthorized landing alone. The northern bay is sacred ground. None may approach it without undergoing the ritual of exalted approach, which takes 7 cycles to complete." The human, Captain Brenner, withdrew his hand and smiled. 7 cycles, huh? That's a week in Earth time? Yeah. We don't really do week-long parking rituals. Our mission brief said this was supposed to be a quick meet and greet. Meet and greet? I struggled to comprehend this casual terminology. You have been granted the unprecedented honor of an audience with Supreme Leader, Drathar. This is not a meet and greet. This is the most significant moment of your insignificant lives. The female, Dr. Priyakumar, stepped forward. We understand the cultural significance. Attaché Vex. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding in the communiques. We were invited as representatives of Earth to discuss potential diplomatic relations. Relations? My voice emerged as a strangled hiss. The quantum dominion does not have relations. We conquer. We subjugate. We rule. You are here to formally surrender your world to Supreme Leader, Drathar's infinite wisdom and mercy. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Yeah, said Captain Brenner, scratching his chin. That's not going to work for us. We were thinking more along the lines of a cultural exchange. Maybe some trade agreements. Earth isn't really into the whole subjugation thing. We've tried it locally, and it's just not sustainable. Lieutenant Sanchez, who had been examining our sacred hall of ancestral conquests, turned to me. Hey, what's with all the fog machines? You guys hosting a concert later or something? My respiratory membranes fluttered in shock. Those are not fog machines. They are the sacred mist generators of dread and submission. Their purpose is to instill appropriate terror in all who approach the Supreme Leader. Sanchez nodded, taking another bite of his odorous sustenance. Uh-huh. We have the same thing at haunted houses back on Earth. Halloween stuff, you know? Pretty cool effects. Bit much for a Tuesday, though. It is not a Tuesday, I sputtered. It is the 7,423rd cycle of Drathar's glorious reign. Well, it's Tuesday for us, Captain Brenner said with a shrug. Anyway, when's our appointment? We were told 1400 hours Galactic Standard. Appointment? The humans thought they had an appointment with the Supreme Leader of the Quantum Dominion, as if he were some kind of service provider. My cranial ridge fully extended in outrage. Supreme Leader Drathar grants audiences according to his divine whim, not by appointment. You will wait until the ceremonial gong of attention is struck, which may be moments from now or several cycles hence. It is part of the psychological conditioning that prepares supplicants for proper submission. Dr. Priyakumar made a notation on her tablet. Fascinating. Your culture employs uncertainty as a power mechanism. On Earth, we generally find that transparent scheduling builds trust and efficiency. Trust? Efficiency? These were not concepts that had any place in the governance of the Quantum Dominion. Before I could formulate a suitably withering response, Captain Brenner clapped his hands together. Well, while we're waiting, mind giving us the tour? This place is impressive. How many square feet are we talking here? The Grand Council headquarters extends across 17 dimensions and cannot be measured in your primitive concept of square feet, I replied coldly. Neat, said Brenner, already walking toward the forbidden archive of conquered wisdom. What's in here? I rushed after him. You cannot enter the forbidden archive. It contains the accumulated knowledge of all conquered civilizations, preserved for the exclusive use of Supreme Leader Drathar. Lieutenant Sanchez had already slipped past the ceremonial guards, who appeared too confused by his casual demeanor to stop him. Whoa, check these out, he said, lifting one of our sacred crystal data rods. These are like fancy flash drives, right? What's the storage capacity on these babies? Those are not flash drives, I hissed, rushing to reclaim the sacred artifact.
They are crystalline matrices of eternal memory, each containing the entire cultural and technological heritage of a subjugated world.
So, big flash drives. Sanchez nodded. Cool. We've got something similar but smaller. I've got a terabyte one on my keychain. Dr. Priyakumar had already activated one of the archive interfaces and was scrolling through information about a civilization we had conquered 3 millennia ago. This is remarkable, she murmured. According to this, the Palaxians developed a sustainable fusion technology before you conquered them. Did this technology transfer to the Dominion? I deactivated the interface with a sharp gesture. The Supreme Leader determines which technologies are worthy of implementation. The Palaxians' method was deemed inefficient compared to our quantum extraction process. Interesting, said Dr. Priyakumar, making another note. From these readings, their fusion method produced 30% more energy with zero waste products. The wisdom of the Supreme Leader is not to be questioned, I said through clenched teeth. Not questioning, Captain Brenner said with that infuriating smile. Just curious. On Earth, we tend to borrow good ideas wherever we find them. It's kind of our specialty. We're not the strongest or fastest species, but we're champion adapters. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't involve threatening interstellar war, the ceremonial gong of attention reverberated through the headquarters. The humans showed no appropriate reaction to its bone-chilling resonance. Is that our cue? Asked Captain Brenner. Great timing. We were getting a bit peckish. Is there a cafeteria around here? Or does the audience include refreshments? I struggled to maintain my composure. The ceremonial gong announces that Supreme Leader Drothar will grant you an audience. You will now undergo the purification ritual before entering his divine presence. What does that involve? Asked Dr. Priyakumar, suddenly wary. Merely the removal of all potential contaminants. I explained. Your bodies will be sterilized, your minds will be surface scanned for treacherous thoughts, and your garments will be incinerated and replaced with appropriate submission robes. Lieutenant Sanchez stopped mid-bite of his malodorous food. Yeah, hard pass on the mind scanning and clothes burning. We come as we are. Or we go back to Earth. Diplomatic immunity and all that. There is no immunity from protocol, I protested. Captain Brenner stepped forward, his demeanor shifting subtly. For the first time, I sensed something formidable beneath his casual exterior. Attaché Vex, we respect your customs, but we represent Earth as equals, not as supplicants. We'll follow reasonable protocols that don't involve invasive procedures or, frankly, psychological warfare. Now, shall we proceed to this audience in our current state, or should we return to our ship? I faced a diplomatic crisis without precedent. To allow unsterilized beings into the Supreme Leader's presence violated every protocol. Yet, to lose this audience altogether might displease Drothar even more. I made a swift calculation. You may proceed without the purification ritual. I conceded. But you must at least wear the ceremonial collars of submission. I gestured to the ornate metal collars that all visitors were required to wear in Drothar's presence, devices that could, if necessary, administer a paralyzing shock. Dr. Priyakumar examined one of the collars with professional interest. These contain neural inhibitors. We cannot wear devices that might impair our autonomy. I was reaching the limit of my diplomatic flexibility. Then you must at least prostrate yourselves for the journey of approach. All who enter the Supreme Leader's presence must crawl the final 1,000 meters on their primary appendages. Captain Brenner shook his head. We walk in upright, or we don't walk in at all. I felt my career disintegrating before my eyes. Never in 17,000 audiences had anyone entered the Supreme Leader's presence without at least some symbolic gesture of submission. These humans were either the bravest beings I had ever encountered or the most foolish. "Very well," I said, making a final, desperate concession. "But you must at least observe the silence of reverence. No one speaks in the Supreme Leader's presence until he addresses them directly. To do otherwise is death." The humans exchanged glances. Then Captain Brenner nodded. "That seems reasonable. We can wait to be addressed." With that minimal concession secured, I led them toward the grand audience chamber, silently calculating my chances of survival after this unprecedented breach of protocol. The ceremonial procession, normally a 4-hour affair of increasing grandeur, was reduced to a brisk walk down the corridor of mounting dread. "Nice architecture," commented Lieutenant Sanchez, gazing up at the vaulted ceilings adorned with murals depicting the subjugation of countless worlds. "Kind of Gothic meets H.R. Geiger. You guys really commit to the aesthetic." "The corridor of mounting dread has driven 17 species to extinction through pure terror," I informed him coldly. "The murals are painted with the liquidized remains of those who failed to show proper deference." "Huh," said Sanchez, seemingly unperturbed. "We've got something similar at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Less extinction, though." As we approached the final doors to the grand audience chamber, I turned to deliver the traditional warning. "Beyond these doors awaits Supreme Leader Drathar, conqueror of conquerors, master of time and thought, destroyer of 1,000 civilizations. His merest glance has caused stars to implode. His slightest whisper has triggered supernovas. Prepare your mortal forms for possible dissolution upon exposure to his magnificence." "Got it," said Captain Brenner with a thumbs-up gesture. "Big cheese coming up? We'll be cool." The massive doors, constructed from the compressed remains of extinct star systems, slowly parted. The traditional fanfare of impending doom echoed through the chamber, a sound designed to liquefy the courage of even the most resolute visitor. The humans winced slightly at the volume, but showed none of the paralytic terror that was the appropriate response. The grand audience chamber stretched beyond normal perception, its boundaries shifting in and out of multiple dimensions. At its center, suspended upon a throne of crystallized dark matter, sat Supreme Leader Drathar. His form was both massive and ethereal, composed of swirling energies contained within a vaguely humanoid shape. The ceremonial headdress of ultimate authority extended 15 meters above his energy form, adorned with the symbolic representations of every major conquest in Dominion history. Around the throne floated the orbs of absolute truth, devices that detected the slightest falsehood or treacherous thought. The guards of final consequence stood in formation, their weapons capable of erasing beings not just from existence, but from ever having existed at all. This was the most powerful entity in 73 galaxies, a being who had ordered the destruction of entire civilizations for the crime of pronouncing his name with insufficient reverence. And the humans were looking at him like tourists at a moderately interesting museum exhibit. "Supreme Leader Drathar," I announced, my voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "I present the representatives of the planet Earth. They have journeyed across the stars to pledge their world's submission to your infinite wisdom and glory." I glanced meaningfully at the humans, silently pleading with them to play along, to bow, to show some semblance of the required deference. They stood upright, expressions neutral but unafraid. "Supreme Leader." Drathar's form pulsed with energy as his voice reverberated through the chamber, automatically translating into all known languages. "Creatures of Earth, you stand in the presence of the Master of the Quantum Dominion. Your world has been deemed worthy of conquest. Submit now, and your species may survive as servants. Resist, and face obliteration. This was the moment when most species collapsed in terror, when ambassadors babbled promises of eternal servitude, when the formal surrender documents were hastily signed in bodily fluids. Instead, Captain Jake Brenner did the unthinkable. He laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a hysterical laugh. It was the genuine laugh of someone who had just heard a moderately amusing joke at a dinner party. Beside him, Dr. Priyakumar suppressed a smile, and Lieutenant Sanchez actually snorted. The chamber fell into absolute silence. The guards of final consequence froze in shock. The orbs of absolute truth pulsed erratically, unable to process this unprecedented reaction. I felt my life force beginning to leave my body in anticipation of my imminent execution. Supreme Leader Drothar's form expanded ominously, the energy swirling faster as his voice thundered even louder.
You dare laugh in the presence of Drothar! Your insolence condemns your entire world to immediate destruction!
Captain Brenner held up a hand in a casual stopping gesture. Hold on there, big guy. Let's take a step back. First off, hi, nice to meet you. As I told your attaché here, I'm Captain Jake Brenner. This is Dr. Priyakumar, and that's Lieutenant Sanchez. We're representatives of Earth, but we're not here to surrender anything. He had spoken without being invited to speak. He had interrupted the Supreme Leader. He had called the Conqueror of Conquerors big guy. I began mentally composing my final will and testament. Supreme Leader Drothar's form pulsed with rage. You speak without permission. Your defiance is— Yeah, about that, interrupted Captain Brenner, committing yet another capital offense. The whole permission to speak thing doesn't work for us. Earth operates on principles of free expression and mutual respect. We came here for a dialogue, not a monologue. Dr. Priyakumar stepped forward. Supreme Leader, we understand that the Quantum Dominion has its established protocols. However, meaningful diplomatic relations require reciprocity. We respect your position, but we represent our world as equals in this conversation. I watched in horror as Supreme Leader Drothar's energy form expanded to fill half the chamber, a display of power that had caused entire delegations to expire from sheer terror in the past. There is no equality. There is only Drothar. Your world will submit or perish. Lieutenant Sanchez leaned toward Captain Brenner. Someone needs to switch to decaf. Captain Brenner nodded, then addressed the Supreme Leader again. Look, threatening to destroy Earth isn't a great starting point for negotiations, especially since you should know that we've taken precautions. The Supreme Leader's form paused its expansion. What precautions could your primitive species possibly take against the might of the Quantum Dominion? Captain Brenner smiled that infuriating smile again. Well, for starters, the device Lieutenant Sanchez has been carrying isn't food. It's a quantum-entangled transmitter. If we don't return to our ship within 3 hours, or if we return under duress, it automatically broadcasts the complete contents of your forbidden archive to every advanced civilization in the galaxy. Lieutenant Sanchez held up the device he'd been pretending to eat. Sorry about the deception, and the crumbs in your sacred hall, Dr. Priyakumar added. We've had time to examine your archive. Supreme Leader, it contains technologies from conquered worlds that, if widely distributed, would significantly diminish the Dominion's technological advantage. Some civilizations might even consider it an act of liberation worthy of alliance. The chamber erupted in gasps and murmurs. Supreme Leader Drothar's energy form contracted slightly, the first sign of uncertainty I had ever witnessed in his presence. You bluff, he thundered, but with a barely perceptible reduction in volume. Maybe, said Captain Brenner with a shrug. Want to find out? Or would you prefer we start this conversation over, as potential friends rather than as conqueror and conquered? I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. These humans had not only refused to submit, they had cornered the supreme leader of the Quantum Dominion with a diplomatic countermove. For 67 agonizing seconds, no one spoke. The guards of final consequence remained at attention, awaiting orders that did not come. The orbs of absolute truth had dimmed to a confused flicker. Then, something unprecedented occurred. Supreme Leader, Drathar laughed. It wasn't the booming, theatrical laugh he sometimes employed before executing particularly disappointing supplicants. It was a genuine sound of surprise and, could it be, respect. In 17,000 cycles, he said, his voice noticeably less thunderous, no species has ever laughed in my presence. No ambassador has ever interrupted my decree. And certainly, none have ever attempted to blackmail the Quantum Dominion. His form contracted further, assuming a more defined shape. When he spoke again, his voice was almost conversational. You interest me. Humans. Your strategy is either the height of foolishness or the pinnacle of courage. Perhaps both. Very well. Let us start over. As you suggest. Captain Brenner's posture relaxed slightly. Excellent choice. Supreme Leader. In the spirit of starting fresh, we've brought a traditional Earth peace offering. He reached into his uniform pocket and produced a small metal flask. This is bourbon whiskey, aged 15 years in charred oak barrels, one of our planet's finest diplomatic lubricants. The Supreme Leader's form shifted, extending a tendril of energy that took the flask. Another unprecedented moment. The Supreme Leader had never before accepted an object directly from a visitor. What is its purpose? He asked. It's a beverage, explained Dr. Priyakumar. On Earth, sharing a drink symbolizes trust and goodwill. It's customary in many of our cultures to begin negotiations this way. The Supreme Leader's energy tendril manipulated the flask, somehow opening it and absorbing a portion of the liquid into his form. There was a moment of silence. Then a ripple of what appeared to be pleasure moved through his energy pattern. Curious sensation, burning, yet pleasant, complex molecular structure. That's the 15 years of aging, said Lieutenant Sanchez with evident pride. Smooths out the burn, adds notes of vanilla, caramel, and oak. The Supreme Leader absorbed more of the whiskey. I detect these elements. Fascinating. Captain Brenner smiled. Now that we've shared a drink, perhaps we could discuss what Earth and the Quantum Dominion might offer each other as potential allies rather than as adversaries. To my continued astonishment, Supreme Leader Drathar's form descended from the throne of dark matter until he was level with the humans. The guards of final consequence shifted uncomfortably. This had never happened before. Speak, humans, tell me of Earth. For the next several hours, the humans did just that. They spoke not of military capabilities or resources for exploitation, the usual topics of interest when the Dominion assessed a world, but of Earth's history, its diverse cultures, its art and music and literature. Dr. Priyakumar showed images of Earth's natural wonders on her tablet. Lieutenant Sanchez described human sports and games. Captain Brenner recounted the rise and fall of Earth empires, from Rome to the British Empire, emphasizing how conquest had ultimately given way to cooperation. Strength through diversity, he explained. Earth's greatest advances came not from conquest, but from exchange. Different perspectives create innovation. The friction of competing ideas generates heat. Yes, but also light. Throughout this impromptu cultural presentation, Supreme Leader Drathar remained attentive. He asked questions, actual questions, not rhetorical pronouncements. He seemed particularly interested in Earth's chaotic political systems. "Your democracy seems inefficient," he observed. "Constant debate, power transfers, compromise. How does anything get accomplished?" "It's messy," admitted Captain Brenner. "Sometimes painfully so, but it's resilient. When leadership changes, the system persists. No single failure can bring it all down, and it self-corrects over time, usually. The noise and friction you see as inefficiency, we see as the necessary cost of freedom and adaptability." "Freedom," repeated the Supreme Leader, as if testing an unfamiliar concept. "The quantum dominion has achieved perfect order through perfect obedience. With respect, Supreme Leader," said Dr. Priyakumar, "perfect obedience limits creativity. Your own archives show that many of the Dominion's technological advances came from conquered worlds, not from within." I cringed, waiting for the inevitable explosion of rage at this implicit criticism. Instead, Supreme Leader Drothar absorbed more whiskey and responded thoughtfully. "This observation has merit. The rate of innovation within the Dominion has decreased over millennia. We conquer to acquire new knowledge because we no longer generate it internally." Lieutenant Sanchez, who had grown surprisingly comfortable in the presence of the most feared being in 73 galaxies, offered another insight. "That's what happens when everyone's afraid to speak up. No offense, but your setup here," he gestured to the fog, "the guards, the ceremonial trappings, it's all designed to scare people into submission. Hard to have good brainstorming sessions when everyone's worried about being disintegrated for having the wrong idea." I waited for Lieutenant Sanchez to be disintegrated for this observation. Instead, Supreme Leader Drothar's energy form rippled in what appeared to be contemplation. "On Earth," he asked, "how do leaders maintain control without fear?" "The best ones don't try to control," said Captain Brenner. "They inspire. They articulate a vision compelling enough that people choose to follow. Fear produces compliance, but never excellence. Excellence comes from people freely offering their best because they believe in what they're doing." The conversation continued for hours, branching into philosophy, art, music, and more. The humans shared images of Earth's great works, its architecture, paintings, sculptures. They played recordings of Earth music, everything from classical symphonies to jazz to rock. Supreme Leader Drothar seemed particularly intrigued by jazz. "The structure exists, yet each performer improvises within it," he observed. "Ordered chaos, freedom within framework." "Exactly," said Dr. Priyakumar. "That's actually a good metaphor for how we approach many things. Guidelines rather than rigid rules. Room for individual expression within a collaborative structure." As this unprecedented audience continued, I noticed subtle changes in the chamber around us. The fog from the sacred mist generators had dissipated somewhat. The ominous background sounds had faded. The guards of final consequence had shifted to a slightly more relaxed posture. Most remarkably, Supreme Leader Drothar's form had continued to evolve, becoming more defined, more personable. When Captain Brenner finally suggested that perhaps they should return to their ship to report this positive first contact to Earth authorities, Supreme Leader Drothar did something I would never have imagined possible. He extended a tendril of energy toward Captain Brenner, not to obliterate him, but in a gesture reminiscent of the human handshake. The quantum dominion would be interested in further cultural exchange with Earth. Perhaps a formal alliance could be beneficial to both our civilizations. Captain Brenner clasped the energy tendril without hesitation. I think that could be arranged. Supreme Leader, we'll recommend it to our government. Drothar, said the Supreme Leader, in the spirit of this new relationship, you may address me as Drothar. As the humans prepared to depart, Lieutenant Sanchez handed the Supreme Leader the remainder of the whiskey flask. A parting gift. Until next time. Dr. Priyakumar presented a small object, a miniature sculpture of an earthbird. An eagle, she explained. In many Earth cultures, it symbolizes freedom and vision. May it remind you of the beginning of our friendship. As I escorted the humans back toward their vessel, my mind struggled to process the events I had witnessed. In a single audience, these three casual beings had transformed the most feared ruler in the known universe into a potential ally. They had laughed in the face of ultimate power and somehow earned respect rather than annihilation. You know, said Captain Brenner as we walked, your boss isn't so bad once you get past all the doom and gloom theatrics. Supreme Leader Drothar has conquered 10,000 worlds, I reminded him, still unable to fully comprehend their casual attitude. He has obliterated entire species for minor infractions. Maybe, said Dr. Priyakumar thoughtfully. He just needed someone to laugh instead of cower. Fear is isolating. Perhaps beneath all that power is someone very alone. As they boarded their vessel, Captain Brenner turned to me with that now familiar smile. Attaché Vex, it's been interesting. I have a feeling things are going to change around here. Maybe lose some of the fog machines. Try a little background jazz instead of the doom and gloom soundtrack. You might be surprised at the results. With that, they departed as casually as they had arrived, leaving me to report to Supreme Leader Drothar. When I returned to the Grand Audience Chamber, I found it transformed. The fog had cleared entirely. The ominous sounds had been replaced by the human music called jazz. Supreme Leader. Drothar sat not on his throne of dark matter, but in a newly created chair of swirling energy. The eagle sculpture prominently displayed beside him. Zorn Vex, he said, his voice still powerful but no longer deliberately terrifying. The protocols of the quantum dominion require revision. Supreme Leader? I questioned, uncertain of his meaning. The humans have shown us a different path. Conquest has brought us technology and territory, but not growth, not true innovation. Perhaps there is strength in alliance that cannot be achieved through dominion. You wish to ally with Earth rather than conquer it? I asked, struggling to comprehend this fundamental shift in millennia of imperial policy. I wish to experiment with their methods, reduce the ceremonial intimidation, encourage more direct communication, laughter, even. He gestured to the eagle's sculpture. This creature sees farther by flying higher. Perhaps the quantum dominion has been flying too low, focused on conquest rather than elevation. In the cycles that followed, the quantum dominion underwent a transformation that rippled across 73 galaxies. The fog machines were retired. The ominous music was replaced with a rotation of Earth compositions, heavy on jazz fusion. The ceremonial collars of submission were melted down and reforged into tokens of alliance. Most shocking of all, Supreme Leader Drothar began holding regular open audiences where citizens of the Dominion could speak without fear of disintegration. When the formal alliance with Earth was finally signed, it was not a document of surrender, but a treaty of mutual cooperation. Humans began visiting the Dominion in greater numbers, bringing their chaotic energy, their inappropriate questions, their laughter. And with them came innovation at a rate not seen in thousands of cycles. I, Zorn Vex, remained senior diplomatic attaché, though my duties have changed considerably. I no longer enforce protocols of submission, but facilitate exchanges of ideas. I have even, on occasion, been known to laugh. The supreme leader, now commonly addressed simply as Drathar, has developed a particular fondness for Earth whiskey and jazz. He has visited Earth twice, causing considerably less terror than expected. The humans, true to their nature, treated the most powerful being in 73 galaxies like an honored but not intimidating guest. They showed him their oceans and mountains, their cities and art museums. They introduced him to something called stand-up comedy, which he found so compelling that he established a similar tradition within the Dominion. The Guard of Inevitable Submission has been renamed the Guard of Mutual Protection. The Forbidden Archive of Conquered Wisdom is now the Galactic Library of Shared Knowledge, open to scholars from all worlds, including those previously conquered. And it all began with laughter. Simple, genuine laughter in the face of manufactured dread. These humans, with their casual disregard for protocol and their baffling confidence, taught the conqueror of conquerors that true power lies not in inspiring fear, but in nurturing connection. As I compose this record for the Galactic Library, I can hear the sounds of a diplomatic reception in the Grand Hall, Earth music plays, conversations flow freely, and above it all, occasionally, rises the sound of Supreme Leader Drathar's laughter, no longer a prelude to destruction, but a genuine expression of joy. The Quantum Dominion continues to evolve, influenced by the strange, irreverent species that dared to laugh when they should have trembled. And I, who once lived in fear of a single protocol breach, have learned perhaps the most important lesson of all. The universe's most powerful force is not conquest or subjugation or even fear. It is the simple, transformative power of authentic connection. After all, what is laughter but the recognition of shared understanding? What is humor but the collision of unexpected perspectives creating something new? Perhaps. In the end, that is what the humans truly brought to the Quantum Dominion, not submission or resistance, but a new perspective. A perspective that allowed even the supreme leader of 73 galaxies to see himself and his empire with fresh eyes. And so, as the jazz plays and the laughter continues, the Quantum Dominion expands not through conquest, but through connection. All because 3 humans met the Empire's supreme leader and laughed in his face. I am Zorn Vex, and this is my testimony. May it serve as a reminder that the greatest transformations often begin with the most unexpected actions. And that, sometimes, the most powerful response to intimidation is simply to laugh.